down and stop some of that very rapid rise, because local residents and communities have done the right thing and kept to those COVID safe behaviours. So I'd like to thank every one of you, because I know that you will have been involved in that. But we are seeing this increase. To break that down in a little more detail, as you all know, things are very, very different in different parts of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So we're seeing a rapid rise in Cambridge City at the moment, so not parish, and that's very much related to the 18 to 24 age group and the students. Around our more rural areas in Cambridgeshire, we are seeing rises, but it is slower and steadier. Some of it's related particularly to working age people, and we do continue to see in some of our higher risk workplaces some outbreaks there. So I think we are absolutely at a watershed and a challenging time at the moment. We're seeing large parts of the country going into further intervention and further formal restrictions for COVID. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we're seeing that steady rise in cases. It's continuing to go up. So we are absolutely at that point where we want to encourage and support people back into those COVID safe behaviours and to continue those COVID safe behaviours. And some of that's around travel to work and really encouraging people to work from home where they can. Some of it is just about social contact, because we all know that people catch COVID through the social contact. So if we can minimise that contact outside the households that we live with, that is going to help. And some of it is about supporting people to self-isolate if they have symptoms or cases or contacts, because it's really quite hard to self-isolate sometimes, and communities can support people to do that, both in the practical ways, but also in maintaining mental health and well-being. Not by visiting the house, but through being in contact. So we are absolutely at a point in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough at the moment where we're asking our district councils to have local plans to support their communities, and absolutely want to engage with you and ask you to do the very good job that you've been doing so far, and just continue with that over what's going to be quite a tough winter.
Lovely, thank you very much, Liz. Some stark numbers there, and very much reflecting some of our comments earlier that we are far from, this pandemic is far from over, and we need to continue to support one another. And I think the comment you made about supporting people to self-isolate is really important. So that could make all the difference, couldn't it, in terms of containing the virus. Hugh, your reflections on how parish councils have supported this, and particularly from your perspective, the role of faith groups and organisations.
Thank you. We know that this has been a changing picture and a rolling picture right from the start. I think what really struck me, and probably struck all of us, were the number of volunteers who came forward as individuals at the very early stage. People down their roads saying, let's see who needs help down our roads, and neighbourliness increasing in a rate that we probably haven't witnessed before, and people actually making contact with their immediate neighbours. And that sort of spread out, both coordinated, I think, by parish councils and district councils into a formal support for communities. And then with the church aspect, many of our churches had to close. So on one hand, it looked as if the church had sort of shut its doors, and it had literally shut its doors. But the congregations and people associated with the church are very active in their community, doing all sorts of things. And so, and I think now we're moving into this phase where we're all trying to work out what it means for us as communities to gather together. I was struck right at the very beginning of the process when we were debating what was going to happen around Easter, how communities with all those sort of events would come together for social events. Now we're into the season of remembrance, which is COVID is going to have a very major impact on how the communities gather to remember those who left those communities so many years ago and never returned. And we've seen huge increase in the number of people attending remembrance events. Now no longer able to do that this year. and with colleagues in the British Legion, as well as parish councillors and uniformed organisations, those moments of extraordinary opportunity for the community to gather is no longer there, or won't be there this year. And so we're having to reinvent it all the time. So I think, everything from the informal sort of glue of a community through to the very detail of neighbourliness, and then faith communities involved in things like food banks, which there's ongoing need. Many of us at Diocese of Ely, many of our schools are in small rural communities as church schools. We want to make a distinction between faith schools, which we don't believe in, though we've got the Church of England banner over the top. We're not selective on faith. We're there for the whole community. And so we've seen extraordinary acts of generosity across every community, and places in Cambridgeshire and in Peterborough, at the mosques, providing a large number of meals for people in desperate need, working with the homeless. It has been a tremendous community effort, both formal and informal. So I think we need to just pay attention to our communities and to thank them in every opportunity that we can. And I hope church leaders, the clergy like me, are able to express their thanks at a very local level to parish councillors. Because when I was in my parish, I used to go along to the annual meeting of parish councillors, just to say, on behalf of the wider community, thank you for what you do. Because there's a lot of brickbats that go to parish councillors. And I just thought, as a community leader, I needed to acknowledge that. So I hope that some of our clergy and other congregational leaders and faith leaders will express our gratitude to parish councillors for what they've done so far.
Thank you, Hugh. That's really wonderful and inspiring as ever. And certainly from my perspective, I've seen so many faith leaders come alongside groups, parish councils, town councils, voluntary organisations and the public sector to really fight this battle. And it is a battle, and I am in awe of that too, in the way I am of parish councils' responses. So great that rallying call is put out there loud and clear. Thank you. I'm going to ask a question now that's come in from Simon Fairhall. Thanks, Simon. This is perhaps directed initially to Penny, but I would be very interested in Liz's response on this as well. Simon's asking, what role do you think that parish councils can play in encouraging and supporting communities to be physically active? Now, obviously, health and health benefits are going, into maybe a second wave, but certainly as the pandemic continues and then coming out of the other side, is so vitally important that help is given to people to maintain a physically active lifestyle. And I guess a lot of people have benefited from getting outdoors when in the height of the lockdown, it was the only form of social of exercise that was available. So Penny, I'm not sure what your reflections might be on how parish councils can support physical activity in communities.
Well, I'm also a parish clerk for Somersham, and this has been quite high up on our agenda for a number of years actually. And just speaking on behalf of our own parish, it was interesting during lockdown how many more people we saw out and about on their bikes and walking and so on. So that's the sort of thing I think we could all easily encourage as a community. And again, for my parish, we have something called Changing Lives, which is absolutely about getting those people who aren't normally active by putting on various classes, from seated yoga to seated tai chi, Nordic walking, etc., which anyone can actually join. And I would really encourage any other community to do it as well. And none of that stopped during the lockdown. We just had to do it differently. And I think we can all think about how we do things differently. So it's great to see people out and about doing things in my parish. And I would always encourage that anywhere, across any community, actually.
Absolutely. I'm not saying any of us are suffering from this, but COVID belly has become a thing, hasn't it? So anything we can do to beat that, I certainly have put on a pound or two myself. So Liz, again, similarly, reflections from you on the importance of a healthy lifestyle and the role that parishes might help play in delivering that agenda.
Absolutely, and I agree about the importance of physical activity for both physical and mental health, and that ability to get out, to walk, to cycle, and to just participate in safe activities is essential. And I think one of the things that does affect people and is affecting people in different parts of the country at the moment is that there's quite a lot of confusion and uncertainty about what you're allowed to do where. Mm. So we're at the medium tier level in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which is kind of the lowest level of interventions on COVID. But when you go up to the northwest, then there may be some restrictions on indoor sporting activities and things like that. And one thing that I think parishes have done really well is just to share with local people what can be done, what can't be done under the latest guidance, and just make it simple and really clearly explained, so that we're encouraging that healthy lifestyle, which is essential, physical activity, healthy nutrition as well, all those things we need to encourage and actually help protect a bit against COVID, because we know that obesity is a risk factor. So that's important. But I think the parishes can actually get the right information and keep people up to date and help people feel that they're doing the right thing and that they know it's the right thing, because there is a bit of confusion out there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Great advice as always. And, you know, I think we will want to be taking actions from today's conference. This can't just be a moment in time, and certainly we can work with Liz and her team to identify ways we can support parish councils who want to take inspiration from the likes of Penny's and many others that have supported residents to become active, and see how we can help facilitate that. I'm going to turn now to a question from Kirsten Bennett, our great friend from Cambridgeshire Acre, and this gives me an opportunity to name check Acre actually, who have worked so hard, and particularly Alison from Cambridgeshire Acre, to set up today's event, which, aside from one or two small technical issues, I think is a remarkable achievement. Over 300 participants registered. So thank you, Ali, from the bottom of our hearts. You've done an amazing job. So Kirsten asks a couple of questions, but one in particular that I think is really timely is she says that we've seen some amazingly inspirational videos, haven't we, just from which have shown local councils and volunteers do have the expertise to respond in our communities. But in some places, this doesn't happen so well, and these communities can be left behind. Sometimes in terms of supporting residents and maintaining local services and assets. So her question is, how can all of us work together to give the support needed to engage and empower other communities to find volunteers, gain expertise and respond in similar ways? So perhaps turn to Hugh first of all for some reflections on that, which was a theme that came up earlier as well, around the resilience and capacity of parish councils to continue this battle, and also of small voluntary organisations. And then Penny, perhaps for you to come in on the specifics around parish councils. So Hugh.
Thank you. It is a real challenge, and particularly as we see a lot of parish councillors, and in my context, church wardens and PCC members being of an age group that sometimes means they also have to shield and isolate themselves. So there is at one hand been a huge increase in the number of volunteers, but at a structural level, I think we're seeing a challenge at the other end of people coming forward to take responsibility in our communities for the types of offices that we see, whether that be parish councillors or, in my context, as I say, church PCCs, parochial church councils. The critical thing is how we work together. And I just rejoice at the amount of times that I hear parish councils and PCCs functioning together, not in that sort of Vicar of Dibley way, which you're not quite sure whether it was a PCC meeting or a parish council that they were to, but actually they're talking to one another, they're seeking to support one another, because so often we can either decide that we are the sort of the rivalry between us, because one's got a village hall, one's got a church hall, and we're also competing for people to run those, and we're competing for funds. Or we can say, how do we make these communities work? These two different organizations come together and support one another, looking for grants, putting on mother and toddler groups, and all those sort of things that we need to do. It seems to be a huge opportunity at the moment, with more and more people working at home, now living in our communities when they would have dispersed to Cambridgeshire, to London, to Peterborough, to all sorts of places. They're now living in our communities. How can we tap into that great sort of resource that enables people to come in at an entry level without taking on years and years of responsibility that they'll never ever be able to sort of feel that they can pass on to anybody else, because there's nobody else behind them. So working together, and that, I think there's a phrase that you have coined, isn't it? Cambridgeshire Local. It's parishes local, isn't it? Doing things together. And when we see communities not functioning, it's often systemic. We see it, they're not functioning at all sorts of different levels. So together we can make a difference, but individually it's harder.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Hugh. Absolutely spot on. And Penny, did you see a role for CAPALC maybe in supporting communities perhaps where it's not quite so straightforward to harness the type of capacity and support that Hugh's describing to find volunteers and gain expertise?
Yeah, it is really difficult. And I think Hugh's absolutely right. There's so many good organisations and really tiny organisations working in silos within your parish. So what you really need to do is a bit of community mapping and try and find all those different groups and have one big meeting, get them all together to all talk about what you could all do together and how it would work well. And I think right at the beginning of lockdown, this is exactly what happened. We had lots of little groups of people in different parishes all wanting to do something really good for their village. And how do you get them all together again? And I've just in the corner of my eye seen somebody put a message up about Somersham Time Bank. Have I ever thought about working with them for my parish? I can actually say Somersham Parish Council, that is their service. So I would always strongly recommend any parish having time banking, good neighbourhood scheme, anything like that, because certainly in our help desk through CAPALC, there's that confusion right at the end with parishes wanting to help on volunteer schemes. How could they fund it, etc. And if you've got a good scheme in the background, that's quite an easy option for you and an easy one to start with. And if not, now's the time to start thinking about it, because I don't think any of us had in our emergency plans what to do in a pandemic. And that's how I think we need to be looking at things going forward and see where CAPALC can help on that.
Brilliant. And big up for time banking. Absolutely agree with you on that one. Hugh, yes, do come back.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of bounce off something from what Penny has said. I think what we've also seen is how we can not replicate and duplicate what is already happening.
Absolutely.
The community coming together, just as Penny's described, lots of organisations. It's great to not only identify who's doing what, but what the gaps are, and maybe to stimulate between ourselves who could fill that gap, rather than saying, I'm going to set up another, book lending scheme, but we've already got 3 of those in this village and we've got a telephone box converted to a library. We don't need that. But what do we need? And that's the community again coming together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Get some really practical advice there, as well as some wise words around how we might structure this. And I think clearly, we're all keen to support that kind of local action. CAPALC, ACRE, the county council. We'll be very happy to talk to anybody that wants to explore a time banking model, which have proven so invaluable during the pandemic. I'm going to turn now to a question that's come in from Helen Dye. Thank you very much, Helen. And it's odd, actually, in some ways, to be talking about recovery when today really is a bit of a call to arms to deal with what we are seeing at the moment. But recovery, nevertheless, is vitally important. We know that society won't simply reset and nobody's going to suddenly say the pandemic is over. That's not really how it's going to work. So Helen's question, which I'm going to ask Liz to comment on, if that's okay, to start with, Liz, is about green recovery. She's saying that she's really interested to hear the panel's view on how COVID recovery can be supported by the themes under a green recovery agenda. For example, active travel, shopping local, and sustainable food networks. And these are themes I know, Liz, that are very close to your heart and very close to the principles of public health. And wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about how that might play out in real time.
Yes, I'm absolutely with the person who's asked this question. What we've seen during COVID-19 is how quickly people and organisations can adapt when there's an emergency. And just working in the county council, how rapidly we've managed to adapt to virtual working, to get our computer systems sort of more up to date with the remote logins. And we have flipped very quickly from an organisation where we were driving from meeting to meeting to an organisation where we're working with our partner organisations as well, in a much more virtual space. And I think that fits very closely with the Green Agenda, because we have our climate emergency. We know it's a much more drawn out emergency, but we know that it's very, very serious business. And what we've proved that we can do during COVID-19 in terms of changing our behaviours and changing what we do, we absolutely need to take some of that and take it forward into our thinking about the way that we address climate change and green issues. So I think it's very important that we don't lose this, and that we take this opportunity and we continue with that active travel and that remote working, so that we're not using our cars, and that we just look at every opportunity to do that. And I know that there's a recovery group sitting under the Local Resilience Forum, which is looking at the environment and is thinking systematically through these opportunities as well. So there is work and thinking going on.
Thank you very much, Liz. And for Helen and anybody else interested in finding out more about the work of that group, or the overall approach being taken around green recovery, do just get in touch with us. Leave a message on the chat box, email me. There are multiple ways to get in touch, and we'll happily provide some information and put people in touch with the right people. Thank you very much, Liz. A question specifically for you, Hugh, that's come in from Yvonne Murray from Histon and Impington, who I'm going to make you blush now, actually, who said that the joint approach between the parish council, churches together, and the local charity in Histon and Impington was extraordinary. And we came together, she says, very quickly. She asks, though, how do you, Hugh, representing the church, see us keeping these groups together in the future? And how does the community glue grow even stronger?
I think that's a really interesting question, because we can all respond to a crisis, but it's the ongoing attrition, isn't it, that we need to be aware of. I think, speaking as a diocese, we have a diocesan strategy which we've called ED 2025, a people fully alive. And the third lever in that is about community engagement and serving our communities. So as a diocese, we're giving a very clear signal that we need to be engaged at each of our local communities. And one of the challenges for us is, how do we do that as we go forward, not just in terms of personnel, but actually in terms of how do we sustain medieval buildings with small rural congregations? What will that mean for us? What does it mean to be a presence in that community? And so there's two answers. There's one at an institutional level, which we've got to address. And then the second is we as diocesan staff taking a lead and saying to congregations and to clergy, this is not just about Sundays. This is about every day of the week, getting and going, and we mustn't lose sight of that. We're constantly repeating that message, raising that aspect up. And also, I think, finding small ways for people to get involved. And if we can identify those small ways, then people have confidence that they can make a difference in their community. And so often people think, oh, I can't do that, if only somebody else could. But, all of us looking out for people say, no, that's a great idea. We need help with this. Come along. You can only give a couple of hours a week, but that's fine. And that small building up of confidence may help. But it's a constant battle that we've got to make sure that we don't lose sight of.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, events like this really do remind us of the need to continue to pull together. But my sense of our great county is that this is happening naturally. You know, we all clearly care passionately about what we do, and I sense, like you, Hugh, a real optimism around this effort continuing, actually. And you know, the big message from me today on behalf of the county council certainly is that we want to enable as much of that to continue to happen as possible. So thank you very much. Of course, there are lots of people affected or will be affected by COVID and other circumstances other than health impacts. And one of those is the economic impact on our communities and individuals. And a question from June Bull, thank you very much, June, is around what is being done about vulnerable people who are increasingly falling into debt. She gives an example in her parish of giving a grant to support debt advice, but more needs to be done. And so I'll perhaps turn to Penny in a second, but just from my reflection on that point, it is something we are gravely concerned about, actually. And we've obviously been dealing with the very present impacts of a pandemic on individuals who have been poorly and in some cases have sadly lost their lives, and their families and friends and so on of those victims. But we know that come the end of the furlough scheme at the end of the month, and despite other schemes coming forward, there will be inevitably a number of people who may be unemployed for the first time, or whose levels of debt will start to spiral. I just want to name check, if I might, one of our fantastic colleagues, Oliver Morley from Huntingdonshire District Council, who I know is on the call today, on the conference today, so I hope he's not blushing too much. But Oliver has stepped forward into this space and has really banged a lot of doors until they opened to try and get some data and some ideas and some partners to really understand the extent and potential scale of this problem of economic hardship for families and for individuals. He's doing some brilliant work to come up with some really innovative plans and ideas, and we'll make sure, I'm sure Ollie, if you were able to contribute here, would be saying the same. We'll make sure that parish councils are invited to participate in that. And if we can do a few good things in a few areas to show and demonstrate the art of the possible, hopefully that will then be scaled up and inspire others. But actually getting debt advice is a big important part of that work. There's a huge amount of debt advice out there. Our citizens advice bureaus, our churches, and the work that churches do around debt and funding advice and opportunities, but also the work that DWP are doing to get people back into work is so vitally important. Again, Penny, I'm not sure, though, if you had any other reflections in relation to the parish council's role, or indeed CAPALC's role in supporting the economic hardships that communities will be facing.
It's really quite difficult, because mainly what we can do is just signpost people to the right organisations. And like June, her parish has put money into an advice centre. That's the sort of thing you can do. But unless your council has a general power of competence, you cannot fund individuals or individual families. So you could only use your Section 137 money, for those who know what that is, to support an organisation that you know will be of benefit to your community. And I think that's going to become more and more important. So things to think about when you're setting your budgets this year for next year.
Yeah, very much so. And I think we in one of the previous sessions, we talked a lot about the importance of sharing information, sharing data. You know, we need to, all of us, I think, collectively need to have a really good understanding of exactly which households here we're talking about. This isn't, you know, every household, every individual has their own circumstances and their own challenges. And it's clear that a blanket approach to challenging and helping people to come out of an economic crisis is going to be very individualistic. So it's really important that we commit to sharing that data. And this is a commitment I'm making on behalf of the County Council to ensure that parishes and VCS organisations and others really do have a good understanding of what reality is like for the people that are within your towns and villages. So
may I say, Adrian, I think those who are very often at greatest need are the ones that don't tell you, and it's perhaps their friends or neighbours that make others aware.
Yeah, I think that's right, Penny, and also you know, if you know, the big county council, the DWP, you know, isn't on every street, whereas parish councils and volunteers are, and often we know that people who are facing a crisis in their life, that frankly the last organisation they want to be telling is the county council, who hear all sorts of tales of concern about what might happen to their children, and you know, and whether they'll be blacklisted and so on. So absolutely, it's about finding the best way to identify and reach out to people in the safest way possible that allows them to take opportunities to recover. Really important work. Just while you've got the mic, Penny, we'll just pick up on one of the questions that came in advance, which was a comment that said it's good to see Penny in the role of Chief Executive. Here. We're interested to hear what direction CAPALC will be taking under your leadership.
Oh gosh, well,
big question.
It is a big question. So what have we been doing? We're undergoing a business review, as Adrian knows, so we're well underway with that. But at the same time, we've been reviewing all our services and the things that we can offer you in your membership. So we've upped our training programs. That's been very interesting in light of COVID. There's so much online. Well, it's all online now, and that's proved extremely popular. In the background, our help desk, we have a help desk. Our turnaround time, we aim to have between 12 and 24 hours on the easier to answer, none of them are easy generally, but easier to answer queries, and we've got the support of NAUC for the more complex queries, and they take a little bit longer. We have a data protection officer service that is available to members at a small additional fee each year, because you never quite know when that freedom of information question crops up, or the awkward parishioner questions that you need help with. We have an HR consultant that comes as part of your membership with a first hour free advice, and generally most questions can be answered in that. And we have a financial advisor with the same 1 hour free advice. But overall, we're looking at the whole raft of the things that we're giving you, and generally upping our game, I suppose, and being working more with other organisations, etc. So watch this space, hopefully.
Fantastic, thank you, Penny, and a really honest reflection. I think anybody saying upping their game, you know, in a forum like this clearly means business, and I certainly, my organisation is right behind you and well alongside you, as you know. So really keen to promote the work of CAPALC. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn now to a question that's come in from Terry Jackson from Cottenham. Thank you very much, Terry. And this I'm going to ask Liz to comment on, if I may, to begin with. Terry asks or states that Cottenham's is a great example of co-production in tackling COVID-19. And specifically asks, is there a future for this in association with, for example, social prescribing, local referral mechanisms, perhaps between GPs and other groups, and the patient participation groups? So this is really a question, I guess, about how we can harness the capacity and intelligence and opportunity that exists within the health system to support the work of parish councils, both in terms of tackling COVID, but also in terms of growing and supporting our communities in the future. So Liz, any reflections on that?
Well, I think that's a really good question from Terry. And certainly what the work during COVID-19 has taught me is that power of local communities to get things done, work together and make a difference to the residents. So I think particularly working across a wide area like the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, you often talk about these things in theory. And so you're sort of hearing about it and you're looking at the latest research, and it's a bit theoretical. what working during COVID has done has really brought home to me what happens on the ground at the front line in local areas, and we've seen some real difference made by that. I'm talking particularly Peterborough here, because Peterborough had some rather higher rates back in July. At one point we appeared, I think, 6th in the country for our COVID rates, and we had this system where we looked every day at the epidemiology, the distribution of cases, where those cases were cropping up, what the causes were. And we had this sort of almost daily relationship where we were feeding through that information from public health into a rapid response team, which worked really closely with community leaders. And that absolutely brought home to me personally the benefits of that very local work and that work with community leaders, and how much we can achieve through that. So I can't give chapter and verse on how that would translate into future work across health and parish councils. But I think in a great many areas, people will have learnt by doing. And what we need to be really careful about is preserving those relationships and those interactions, and making sure that they continue and can be of benefit on other health issues as we go forward. So absolutely, yes, very open to that. But it's each local area, in a sense, will have proved it, and it's building on that locally.
Absolutely, local is the buzzword of the day, I think. And while social prescribing, for example, we know will exist across our whole county, we want to make sure we support our health colleagues to understand the nuances and individualities of each and every parish and community, and have those social prescribers that were referred to alongside parish councils and other public servants to really get under the skin of and tackling those issues that really matter to parishioners. So thank you, Liz, very much indeed. I'm going to turn to a more global issue actually now, and this is a point that's been made by two Terrys actually. So Terry Jordan, nice to have you with us today, Terry, who was commenting that he hopes that the community support will continue irrespective of the existence or not of COVID. But Terry Jackson added that we need to think about that in the context of inevitable impacts of global warming on local communities, likely in our lifetimes. So it's kind of a big leap in some ways from dealing with what we're dealing with now to how parishes and our combined efforts can support and attack and address global warming. But I'll ask Hugh first of all if he thinks there's a connection there, and obviously the church I know are very active in this context of global warming, and whether there are some reflections. Well, I would have asked you. It looks like we've just lost you to the technology, which is a great shame. So instead, I'm going to put Penny on the spot and ask you, Penny, for any reflections you've got on a link between the effort we've seen in the pandemic and whether there's work we can do together with parishes in relation to tackling global warming. Oh, huge question.
It's a huge question, and the answer is yes. I'm sure there is. Off the top of my head, I can't think right now, but. Global warming and our impact. Well, we've all gone to remote meetings, haven't we? And reduced travel, etc. I'm sure moving forward we can build on those things. I know at CAPALC we're in the very early stages of looking at a climate action plan that we can work with both internally and for our councils. So it certainly would be things in there that we would consider. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's very unfair of me to put you on the spot like that, but I think it's a really valid point and something we can't lose sight of. You know, most of our effort at the moment and energy is focused on dealing with the pandemic, but we know that these other big, issues are out there, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. Liz, any reflections from you on the link between local action in relation to the pandemic and how parishes might support climate change?
I think there's a sort of a twist is there, because COVID is very much about how individuals behave, but it's also about how we work at national level on the science. So there's different ways of addressing COVID. absolutely starting at the local level with people's social interactions, people's behaviour, huge difference that every member of the community can make. But we've also got internationally the work on the vaccine, the work on looking for effective treatments, and the pulling together of the epidemiology. And for me, the climate change issues are quite similar, because it's all about individual behaviour and what we can do individually, and also it's all about the science and how national and international science can help build solutions for us. But you need both. So we've all got a responsibility in both areas, but at the same time, we need to look to that scientific advance. So I can see many parallels. And I think we can move quite easily from the approach to one to the approach to the other.
Yeah, wonderful.
Now, just add that there are a lot of town and parish councils out there that have already started some terrific work. And CAPALC are going to start looking into that as well.
And obviously, as a county council, we've signed up to the climate challenge and the climate emergency work. And obviously, anything we can do to work with you, Penny, to pull people together across parish councils that are interested in engaging specifically in that agenda, we'll be really keen to do. Certainly, I know my leader, Councillor Count, is personally leading a lot of work on this nationally. So, and great to see Ben's comment around the ambition of St Neots there, working to be carbon neutral by 2030. Some incredible work going on. And it is important, I think, isn't it, that we do reflect sometimes on life outside of a COVID world, because we will get through this, but these problems will still be there. So that's really, really helpful. There was a question earlier that came in around ways in which we might support non-parished areas to become parished. Again, Penny, I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and whether we should be making that effort, whether there's a role for other parish councils to show the value, or whether we should leave alone and let them be.
I think they should be parished, and there's another area of work that we've absolutely got to get onto and formulate some plans on. We don't have anything in place at the moment, but there's a lot to be said for parishes and everybody working together for their own community. You know your own community.
Try again, Penny.
Parishes and parishioners and villages, they all know their own communities so much better. So if we can get them to be parished and work properly together, I think it's great. And it's something that CAPALC have yet to formulate some action on, but we will be.
Great. I'm really sorry you dropped out. We lost a bit of what you said at the start. Was there anything that you just wanted to say again, just in case?
Well, nothing really, other than yes, for parishes, and CAPALC will be, drawing up some action on that and how we could tackle it and sell the value of why you should be parished, really.
Yeah, certainly. Again, as a large county council, it's a real pleasure to have wholly parished areas, and it certainly makes for the local approach we want to take far simpler if we can engage through that kind of network and really respect the proper status of parish councils as the first tier of local government. And I guess, Liz, for some of our public health challenges, having areas where there is that kind of infrastructure in place inevitably must help to make our task a bit simpler and perhaps the impact more effective.
Absolutely. It is the power of communities, isn't it? And the power of people knowing each other and being able to do things together that it's really hard for people to get the motivation to do on their own. So it is that bit of people wanting to give to their communities and to coordinate. And we talk about community leaders, and I've met a lot of community leaders now who are fantastic people who just have that energy to do the right thing.
Yes.
And that just makes a huge difference to people's and there's some initiatives that are all about supporting people who are vulnerable, and a big difference can be made there. There's also something more general about the mental health benefits of being in a community which cares and which interacts, and where you have some of those leaders just
absolutely
working through the difficulties and getting there and achieving stuff. So very important for public health.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you. Mental health has been mentioned a couple of times, and particularly in those inspirational videos, and it's such a vital area of attention that we must focus on. The impacts of mental health, we know, has been fairly exponential actually during the pandemic. So we've got about 4 minutes left before we break for lunch. There's an awful lot of fantastic chat content between parish councils, and that's really great to see. There is a question though that's come in around public health support for employers. We've talked an awful lot about community support, but for those people going out to work, and particularly in the pandemic, we know of a number of cases that have seen outbreaks in workplaces, and there's a question here around public health support and how public health rather can support employers and businesses with a COVID response. I wondered, Liz, if you could briefly summarise some of the work we've been doing with employers and employees.
Absolutely, and this is an example of again of partnership work and cooperation, because under our overall Cambridgeshire and Peterborough outbreak management team, which is led by County Council Public Health, we have what's called our workplace cell, and that is across environmental health in the district councils and the county public health and various other partners. So that does some really good work, working with employers in a preventive way, so making sure that they have the right information to do their risk assessments, that environmental health can help them with that. And also if they have a case or an outbreak, again, environmental health goes in there with them and helps them through that, but also working with my team and with the Public Health England regional team. So we bring everyone together to support our workplaces. And we actually have found that very effective. And I would say that Regional Public Health England have praised some of that work on how together across environmental health, public health and others, we are working with our employers and really and businesses are brilliant. They try so hard to make their environments COVID safe, and they work so well with us. We're really impressed by a lot of the businesses we work with. Yeah,
it has been incredible, hasn't it? That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Liz, indeed. And I should say thank you to both of the remaining panel members who did manage to cope with the technology and the connectivity. Hugh, I know, will be incredibly upset that he had to drop out, and Sean too sends huge apologies. But as I say, we will make sure that we respond to all of the questions that we haven't had time to get to in this session, and do continue to feed them through in any of the forums or sessions that are running throughout the rest of the day. We'd be really keen to capture all of those and circulate the responses to everybody. So thank you, Liz. I know you're incredibly busy at the moment, probably the busiest person in our county right now, dealing with a global pandemic, and to you, Penny, too, for all that you're doing. Amazing work. Thank you very much. I just want to spend a minute now just explaining what's going to happen for the rest of the day. So we're going to have a break now for an hour, time to again to stretch your legs and come away from your screens. But do come back during that hour, please, and visit the fantastic market stalls. Staff there are on hand to answer questions. There's lots of material there for you to have a look at and download, and make some connections for future work in your parishes. And then from 2 o'clock, we move into workshop sessions, which all look to be really interesting and full of important information. So just to recap, the first session is about making lives better, the future of technology in our communities. And there were quite a few comments about how we've all had to cope with a rapid learning curve on technology during the pandemic. So I think that would be very interesting. Second workshop there on preparing for emergencies. Again, very timely, given what we've been coping with during the pandemic. A third workshop on strengthening town and parish councils' offer to residents. Again, building on a lot of what we've talked about this morning. Our fourth workshop is on enabling, supporting volunteering, perhaps an opportunity there to explore this theme of resilience, how we continue to keep volunteers motivated, considering the effort they've already put in. A fifth session on improving collaborative working between clerks and councillors, including leadership and roles. I think that's going to be really timely, a session run by Kapalk. In how we can bring together clerks and councillors and perhaps explore that kind of inter-council relationship as well. And then a sixth workshop on how local councils can develop, manage, maintain and own community assets successfully. And that's something that I've been certainly passionate about before in my Peterborough role. We've delivered a really comprehensive programme of asset transfer and something I'm really keen to continue to support. And I'd end by saying that certainly the commitment from my organisation is that for all of this to happen requires bureaucracy to be minimised as far as possible. And we as a county council are really keen to ensure that we remove barriers that simply don't need to be there to enable parishes to thrive and flourish. So that's enough, I think, from me. Thank you so much for your participation in the Q&A panel, and do please enjoy the rest of conference. It's great to see you all virtually here today. Thank you.